Hey guys, we're live on yet another OnConscious podcast. It's me, Reba, and then I've got Chris McLean with me, and our guest today is Justin Clarke from Orbis Coffee in the UAE. Hi, Justin. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you.
Good morning from, actually good afternoon from here in the UAE. And if you're watching, tuned in to us from the UK, good morning to you from Melbourne. Of course, good evening.
Yes, good morning, good evening. Sounds like the Truman Show.
Everything,
good morning,
yeah.
Good evening, good afternoon, good night.
And of course, Ramadan Kareem. Have a blessed Ramadan to all of you guys watching us from across the world. So a little bit about Justin and Orbis. So Justin is the CEO and founder of Orbis Coffee in the UAE, and Orbis was started back in 2006 when Justin discovered there's actually a market for locally roasted specialty coffee. Back in 2006, it was a very small group of people, but of course, since then, the coffee industry has expanded so much, not just across the world, but here in the UAE, and we're having fantastic coffees from across the world coming in. So right now, of course, you can see that Justin in his amazing roastery, which is in Al Quoz here in Dubai. Orbis is actually concentrating on getting coffee direct from farms, small batch roasting, and also coffee training. What else have I missed, Justin?
Well, thank you so much for the very kind introduction, and certainly Ramadan Kareem to everybody as well. And first of all, a special hi to my mum in Ibiza. Love you lots. See you soon. Well, I was very fortunate, really, that when I came to Dubai in 2006, I saw a gap in the market, really, for specialty coffee. And if you think all the way back then, nobody was really roasting here in any volume. A lot of mums and grandmas were roasting in the gardens in the traditional way that we might see in Ethiopia. But really, nobody was really taking the specialty coffee as we define in Europe and the US, and really making that available to the wider market. So that's what I did, and I started. I didn't really have any money. Still don't have any money, but never mind. What I was doing was, in Al Lakhbab, which is on the road to Oman, way out in the desert. I hired a little shop. I bought a little electric roaster, and I started roasting coffee. And what was very clear right from the start was that hotels started to realize that their guests wanted something a little bit different. They didn't want a major brand. What they wanted is a story behind the coffee. So everything that I've tried to do has been about creating stories for our coffee and our product, which then the hotels, the bars, the restaurants can put on their menus, and the guests really seem to like that. So all of the coffees that we sourced, doesn't matter where they're coming from, we try and make sure that there's a genuine coffee, a genuine story that we can tell, and that we pay more than the brokers, and then try and give that back to the community. So now we're sourcing from over 20 different locations. That's as far as the islands in Indonesia, Toraja and Flores. And it can, go right the other way to the tip of South America. So we're just very lucky, and we have relationships now that, 15 or more years. So I've just been very, very fortunate to work with some really great guys.
So that sounds fantastic, Justin. How do you say the coffee scene has evolved in Dubai, UAE, or the Middle East generally?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I don't think you can go around any corner in Jumeirah without coming across a specialty coffee shop now.
That's right.
I heard, the latest reports that came out said there were an unbelievable 52 coffee roasters here in Dubai alone now. When I started, I think there was me, and then a few other great players came in. Raw came in, and a few others, and we all support each other hugely in the background. But what's interesting is apparently now there's 52. If somebody can make me a list, I need to get around and taste some coffee. But isn't that wonderful? And that really shows you that the market has moved away from the mass brands. I think we all know them well, and people really want coffee that's sourced direct from farm and has a story, and ultimately has got a great taste as well. And that's that, of course, is the key thing, right? Is the taste at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't... Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go. No, you go. Yeah, so that crop to cup story is always really, obviously I'm living back in Melbourne now, and there's probably slightly more than 52 roasteries in Melbourne. It's probably more like 5,000 or 520. And I work my job is working with coffee roasters and cafes. But yeah, that and I work in marketing for that sort of business. So that that crop to cup story from a marketing and I guess a business perspective is something that we definitely see a lot of roasters and specialty coffee brands doing to really tell that story of. And I think that is that something that you've done deliberately, or just something that sort of came naturally as a way to teach people about coffee and give them a bit more of it's just coffee?
I mean, I think it's essential, isn't it? In a little while we're gonna try my Nepalese coffee. This comes from a really unique plantation about 75 kilometers north of Kathmandu. It's owned by almost my best friend, a guy called Ujjal Rana. And we've been through a lot together. Nepal is a beautiful country. It can also be an exceptionally harsh country. And I remember, I think it was 2004, the big earthquake there, and their processing plant, their washing station, most of their village schools, these were flattened. And we worked with him, in order to allow him to recover. We've always paid more than the market rate, and now when we order more coffee, of course, we always know we get the best coffee because he's sending it to us here in Dubai. And I think that now it's the family that's taking over as he's getting a bit elderly and he's stepping back. But it's those relationships that go through the generations, and that's really what we're looking for, here at Orbis.
Yeah, it really is. When you get into it, it really is it's a people business. I know I've seen a lot of the brands you get, there's roasters here that will literally fly to the jungles of South America to literally meet the pickers and work with them and teach them how to grow and farm organically and how to do all that stuff to make a better coffee, so that they're getting better green beans, that they can roast better, and then that becomes that story, that sort of crop to cup story. So you've got that story element, but it really is that people business and really celebrating that it is somebody's grown the plant, somebody's picked it, somebody's put that love into it. It's not just a bean, it's not just a grind that we sort of go to the supermarket and we pick up. There is more to it. So I think it's actually like anything, when you, as we were talking about sort of backstage, on the show, we'd like to do everything more consciously. So I think that's sort of a bit where I'm getting to. We can do coffee more consciously the same way we can do meditation or life or bucket lists, like we were talking on the last show, and how we show up in life. If we're more conscious about how we eat, what we're doing, our fitness, our health, it's just a more interesting life.
I think it really is.
So, yeah, for sure.
It's got them, and you were talking about celebrating just the making of the coffee and drinking it, but not just that, but the people behind it as well. Ramadan is a very important celebration across the world, not just in this region. How does the consumption of coffee tie in with Ramadan? How does it change? Do people drink more coffee during the times that they're not fasting, or does it go down? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, you would think that in Ramadan, if people are fasting from dawn to dusk, that the consumption of coffee would drop off, right? That would be the logical thing. So the interesting fact is that in Ramadan, our coffee consumption goes up by 30%. So rather weirdly. So I think as soon as iftar is is over and done with, and then of course the family gatherings. That is the time where significant amounts of coffee in whatever form, people like to have it, are consumed, and I think that goes on until probably the early hours, and then obviously there's the fasting period the following day. So overall, there's an awful lot of coffee that's consumed during that time. I suspect that in this region, of course, there's probably a lot more Arabic and a lot more Turkish coffee, but things are changing now, and we do put out an awful lot of specialty coffee this time of year as well. So I'm assuming that in the family gatherings and the majalis that people are moving maybe more towards specialty coffee rather than the sort of more traditional offerings. But I have a few coming up. I'll let you know.
That's fabulous. When we talk about coffee during Ramadan, I think I really want to touch about this other thing. May Mustafa actually has sent us a question. Thank you so much for that, May, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But before that, coffee sensitivity, something we wanted to cover. Actually, we did promise our listeners a couple of shows ago that we will touch on this, because a lot of people are actually facing coffee sensitivity currently at the moment. They want to enjoy the drink, but you can't have coffee. I can't have hot coffee after 2 in the afternoon, or especially when I'm fasting. Do I shift to decaf, or is there coffee from certain regions that I should be concentrating on, or should I even be drinking espresso? Should it be filtered? There's just tons of questions. Maybe you'd like to throw some light about that, Justin.
Yeah, I can certainly try. It's quite a big topic, coffee sensitivity. I think I just want to start. I'm just going to move these to one side for a second.
Okay, yeah, please tell us, what have you got there on the table? I mean, that's just intriguing.
I have quite a few things to be revealed later.
Yeah, okay.
I think the first thing to understand is that when we buy coffee beans themselves, I mean, there are four main varietals, but the ones that I think most people are familiar with are the Arabica and the Robusta beans, right? So in terms of caffeine levels, you always, if you are a little bit sensitive to coffee, then you really want to be focused on the Arabica and a little bit less on the Robusta. A lot of the beans that you find in packs on supermarket shelves, they could well be a mix of these, and at the cheaper end of the market, then you're going to get an awful lot of Robusta, and this is going to put an awful lot of caffeine into you. And if you're sensitive to caffeine, then you really want to edge more towards the Arabica. Now I'm not sure if you can see this, but very briefly, you can actually see the difference. I don't think you can see it here, but the Arabica bean is going to be smoother, and you're going to have, when you look here at the cut, it's going to be straight. And then you can look at the Robusta. This is a much rounder bean, okay? And then if you could see that would be more of an S shape. So you can, it's not a scientific approach, is it? But that's one way to look at your beans and see whether you've got Arabica or Robusta.
I think I've got an Arabica over here. Just
I hope it's Arabica because it's from us. So.
Yes, that's from yours. So yeah. That's the S shape that Justin is talking about. I'm sorry, my fingers are not manicured, but okay, let's focus back on Justin. All right.
Okay, no, that's good. Thank you for the participation.
Yes.
So I think people really need to understand what is the basis of caffeine. Trimethyl xanthine is the chemical name. What does that do when you actually consume it, and how much can you consume in a day? Well, the scientific community, of which I'm not a part, says something like 400 milligrams of caffeine is what we can consume in a 24-hour period. Right now, if you're in Ramadan, clearly, are you going to consume that from sunset to sunrise? I'm not sure, but maybe a proportion of that. So 400 milligrams. What does that actually mean? It turns out that if you have a drip coffee, so if I was to consume this would be something like about 150 milligrams in one. So if I have 3 of these of drip coffee, of black coffee in a day, then I've probably got to my 400 milligrams quite quite quickly. Alternatively, if I'm going to go for an espresso, of 30, that's going to give me about 80 mg of my caffeine. So, we can probably have 5 or 6 or 7 of these and still be okay for sleeping at night. Funny enough, if you get a bar of chocolate, then the chocolate's got about 35 milligrams of caffeine in it. So it's not just the coffee. And then, funny enough, if you look at white tea and green tea, these also have 30-something milligrams of caffeine. If we go then to decaf coffee, especially the more natural process, then we're down to 5 to 10 milligrams of caffeine once it's been through the processes. So we've sort of got that range at the very, very high level of 150 all the way down to my decaf coffee of about 5. So that's the effects. Now, how does this affect the body is, of course, the question. So I've had, in normal times, I would have a coffee. Where does it go? What happens to the brain? Well, when you consume this, it goes to your receptors, your adenosine receptors. And the caffeine blocks the adenosine receptors from making you sleepy. So then you are able to feel awake for longer. The question I always get asked is, well, how much longer am I going to stay awake for? So caffeine has got a half-life of 4.9 hours in your average person. So that means after pretty much 5 hours or so, the effect of the caffeine has dropped by half, and then another 5 hours, half and half and half, and then it's extruded. So the reason you want to have more coffee, probably after a couple of hours, is that effect of the caffeine is dropping off, and then you get a top up from another coffee.
So if somebody has heavy caffeine consumption, is used to drinking lots of coffee, that means that person would need more and more coffee to stay awake, isn't it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, that's the really interesting thing. If I'm going to have one of these an hour, then the brain actually produces more adenosine receptors. So on a standard, a normal human brain, there's about 13 billion of these. But if I'm a regular coffee consumer, then the brain will actually grow more of those in order still to be able to trigger the sleep function. And what that then means is that you're just fighting a losing battle. So ultimately, you've got to stop the coffee. Then those additional adenosine receptors will come back to the normal volume, the normal quantity, and then you can go back to drinking normal coffee. Now, the other area that's quite interesting on this is it also affects your dopamine. So caffeine apparently helps your dopamine chemicals to be activated, and that explains in many respects why when you have a nice coffee, you actually feel happier, calmer, and you're in a better place as well. So with all of these things, this is about a balance. It's a balance of how much is appropriate and at what time of day.
You talked about the different sizes of coffee then, Justin, and I'm a long black. I usually have like a medium or a large long black, depending on the day. That's a standard 3-shot or a 4-shot if I'm feeling feisty.
Wow. Okay.
So when you talk about is it purely the volume or is it the type of coffee as well? Because from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if you've got the V60s and the drip filters set up there, I'll usually do like a filter coffee. Is that going to be I believe that's stronger than, say, an espresso?
Yeah, so it
kind of sounds the other way around. I think people assume the espresso is the stronger coffee, but there's actually more caffeine in the drip filter. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's just really based on volume. Well done. So you're getting about 80 milligrams of caffeine here, and you're getting about 3 to 4 times of that once you're into a Chemex or a V60. But this is all about volume, and ultimately it's about how much coffee have you ground, ready for your espresso or ready for your V60. But I think if you're a 3-shot man, then Chris, then you really only want to have a couple of those a day, I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I'm
how
probably one.
Yeah, see, I get a bit jealous how much of coffee that Chris drinks, because I love coffee, but I can't have much. Because you were saying that coffee puts us in a happy place, but for me, it just increases my I don't know. I get very anxious. My fingers start shaking. My eyes start moving in a way that I do not want it to. And I think I've got one of the questions from Yara. Oh, by the way, Toby Clarke says hello, bro.
It's my brother from Ibiza. Hey, Toby.
Okay, so and then I've got a question from Yara. Is it weird that coffee makes me sleep? Maybe my body reads it in a different way. So how does it react?
Because Yara's in theta the entire time, so she's got coffee just brings it up out of theta brainwave into like beta, and she's good.
I think that's marvelous if it makes you sleep. So very often. And this is all to do with the adenosine receptors, right? So sometimes long-term coffee drinkers can say, oh, I can have an espresso at night and I can go straight to sleep. So what that means is that the brain has developed so many more of these receptors that you're almost saturated, and it doesn't matter how much caffeine you put in the top. In the top as in consume, the receptors are still going to be more powerful because the brain has built more of those in effect. So that is quite common if you've always been drinking coffee in your life, or you're starting to go through a stressful period and then you're consuming more coffee and you thought, why am I still sleepy? Well, that's just because the brain actually is telling your body you still need to sleep, and it will keep generating these receptors until your body sleeps. So I would be fascinated to know, Yara, if you have never drunk coffee or if you always drunk coffee, and then we could sort of make a conclusion. But no, absolutely fascinating for sure. And I do get that a lot, especially with people from the Levant region, so from the Syria, Beirut, Lebanon, where they generally drink a lot of very, very strong Robusta-based coffee. Is they'll say, yeah, I'll have one to go to sleep, and I would think, how does that work? But just caffeine is
very interesting
in their system.
Yeah, I mean that brings me to a little bit of my research that I had done before our chat today, and I was talking about there are three main reasons for coffee sensitivity apparently, and one of it is obviously the metabolism rate. So how much of your liver can actually metabolize the caffeine that you are consuming. It depends on individual preference, but the other one is also genetics plays a huge factor in how your body processes caffeine. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Just the same, the size of the person as well. Well, literally the size of the person. I guess similar to alcohol. If you're a small person, the same amount of coffee is going to do more than a big dude.
Yeah, I think that's all, and we can quote figures and weights. These are definitely these are averages, and everybody's got their own sensitivities. Your metabolic rate, of course, that changes. It changes in the month. It changes depending on your age, and many other factors, your diet, your type of diet, whether you're vegan or vegetarian or normal meat eater. These all affect the way that you metabolize the caffeine at the end of the day. I always like to have a glass of water with mine. That just really puts me in a good place. I'm a black coffee drinker, as you would expect, but a nice drip coffee, as we're going to show in a little while, along with a glass of water. It works really well for me. Sometimes a piece of chocolate cake also really helps, but that's a different story.
Oh my God, we've got to wait for iftar, a few more hours to go. For some of our guests, at least. Okay, so shall we get down to brewing business?
Yeah, we absolutely can if you'd like me to. Now, I want to first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about manual brewing here. So there are many types of manual brewing. And I'm just trying to sense the best way to present this. But if you
let's start from here. Maybe I'll help you out a little. What would be the best way for somebody who loves coffee, who loves going out to coffee shops, but right now a little bit of social distancing and everything is happening. So what would be the kind of like a starter coffee brewing setup at home if one would like to brew coffee at home?
Yeah,
the best place to start. Yeah.
Absolutely, great question. So in terms of low cost, and absolutely probably one of the best ways to extract is your French press or cafetiere, depending on where you come from. These I think this cost us about 20 dirhams from Carrefour, so this is not expensive. You're going to get a nice coarse ground coffee. I think most people know how to use these. Top it up, wait a few minutes, and then push down and then consume. So this is absolutely the easiest way to get into specialty coffee. I cannot think of a better and easier way to have a great cup of coffee, at any time of day. The extraction here is very simple, and it gives you a really beautifully balanced, rounded coffee, right? So it's different from the other coffee methods that we're going to talk about. So of the 15, we've got 4 here, but this by far the French press is going to be your simplest method. And I think a lot of people tend to have this morning time, maybe mid-morning, something like that. What people, certainly in parts of Europe, are using is the mocha pot. Clearly goes on the stove. You put your espresso ground coffee here, and this is going to produce normally quite a bitter coffee. So a lot of Europeans would use your mocha pot first thing in the morning. This is really going to wake you up. This is the equivalent of your espresso if you're not lucky enough to have a beautiful espresso machine.
And where does one get a mocha pot from? Is that available?
I think probably the same location as this one. I think probably most supermarkets. There's lots of specialty suppliers here, including us. But I'm just thinking simple terms. I think even you can get these at IKEA as well, I think now. So both. I'm not plugging IKEA, but these are available at very low cost. Just a word of warning on these. I think we've all had this experience, for those of us who've used this, is if you don't pull this very, very tight together, the whole thing can go pop, and you end up with a real mess on your stove, on your gas stove. So
that's happened to me before. That's happened to me a couple of times.
So this really has to be very tight.
Yeah.
And the other thing is don't walk away. So I've made the mistake many times of putting this on the gas stove and going to do something else, coming back, and the whole thing, you ended up with a very messy coffee, and not too much heat. You're aiming on this one for about a 3-minute boil. So you just need to work it out for the size of your mocha pot. But a 3-minute boil would get really nice coffee. But clearly this is short, quite bitter. It's a great wake up in the morning. This is more mid-morning. And then when we start to look more in the direction of specialty coffee, manual brewing methods, I'm thinking that this is more in the afternoon. So I've sort of set this up, your heaviest, your strongest coffee, middle of the morning, I would say. So your Chemex is going to be late afternoon. Let's change these around a little bit. And then your V60, and then probably your Chemex. So that's the range of your deepest, heaviest, bitterest coffee through to your lightest, almost Chemex will almost give you a tisane sort of effect. So that's sort of, and you can put an AeroPress probably here, and there's all the other options as well. So I don't know if that's clear or not, but that sort of would be how I would move from waking up in the morning, if I was a real addict, to very late afternoon as well. We're talking, of course, about Ramadan, aren't we? So in terms of, my recommendation here is not to go too heavy on the coffee, because your digestive system is very much sort of put upside down in many ways. So one would be inclined more, I think, to go for the lighter coffees at this end.
So lighter coffee, I would be assuming either you get your mocha pot or your French press, and then probably mix it with milk or water to have a long black, or either have a filter.
I think this is everybody's preference, isn't it? And I think that's the wonderful thing, is that coffee is very much an individual thing. What I've said about this, and maybe I give you the quantity of coffee, somebody else, well, actually I prefer it this, and I don't like that style of coffee, I want this style. That's the beauty, and that's why coffee is something that we can talk about every day, because everybody's got their own opinion. And the beautiful thing is nobody's wrong, right? So
talking Ramadan and local customs, Justin, on that scale, you sort of got I think when people think of Arabic coffee, generally you think of a very strong coffee, so that very, very thick kind of where you've got grains left in the bottom of the cup, sort of Turkish style.
Right.
But if you go to a meeting in the UAE and they bring around coffee, it's actually way down that other end. It's actually quite a light aromatic coffee. So could you just maybe describe the different types of regional coffees? So I think if people think Ramadan, they think Middle East, they're thinking heavy coffee, but it's actually the traditional coffee, at least in the UAE, is a lighter, sort of more aromatic, sort of tea-like in terms of consistency.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And apologies, I maybe it's the subject of another chat, but so traditional Turkish coffee, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
done in a traditional way, in a sand bath, normally a sezve pot. Kylie, I have a sezve pot. We might be able to show you one in a minute. My wonderful assistant here. Then,
we got to see a team in a bit. Actually, we've got a number of people working in the background.
He's helping me out here. Oh, amazing! Kyla, come and say hello to everybody.
Hi.
Okay.
So, hi.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
We recognize that.
Yeah. So the sezve pot, of course, used across the Levant region, and definitely into the Middle East. This is traditionally uses a lot of Robusta. The Robusta gives you that beautiful, that beautiful froth on top, and this again is really gonna wake you up. So I would be inclined to put this probably here, and it's gonna be quite light and frothy, but it's a lot of caffeine. So this again would be a great maybe wake up, but certainly not something you want to have as you head off to sleep and to rest. If we look at the Arabic coffee here, which there is a 1,000 different formulas, but the fundamental is that the coffee is very lightly roasted. That means the caffeine level is very light. Very often it's flavored with star anise or with cardamom or with rose water, and then you're back up here in the same sort of area. So that's the sort of regional wise. And certainly, you can spend an hour on how to do the sezve pot correctly. But those are probably where the two regional coffees head in as well.
Okay, so let's start brewing. We've got a couple more questions for you, but I think we're really, really interested to see what you're making up for us today. Are we doing a Chemex or a V60?
Yeah, well, we're going to try and do both. I don't know how successful I'm going to be.
You're gonna get a bit ambidextrous and try to do two pour-overs.
We'll try and work this out. Yeah. So on our V60 here, we're going to use a ratio of 15 to 1. Right. Now why do we do that? And the Chemex we're going to use as a 10 to 1. So the V60, because the paper, a lot of people will remember a form of this, the Melita, probably from when they were kids, as a child as well. The V60 is going to give us a lot more oil and a lot more flavor as well. So we're going to do we're going to put David's Hawaiian Kona coffee into this one, and then on the Chemex, which we're going to use as a 10 to 1. We're going to use the Nepalese coffee, yeah. So just in terms of general awareness, so the V60 uses a thinner paper and the Chemex uses a much thicker paper. So that's one of the reasons the Chemex has a lot more absorption in terms of the oil. So you will get a finer body and aroma, which is why I'm going to use the Nepalese, because that's ideal for this type of coffee. So we'll still be able to see me, but first of all, I'm just going to do a very quick clean, a very quick pour. Why do we do this? Because there are actually chemicals in here, and what we're trying to do is just to make sure that any chemicals used in the cleaning of the paper is removed. So great, thank you. Super. So we'll just pour those away. Also, the added advantage here is that we're actually heating up the pot, so that's nice. It means our coffee isn't going to go cold.
Yeah, I think even a V60 or a Chemex, it's perfect for home brewing as well. It's kind of Everybody should. I really think so. Because the entire experience of whether you're using a grinder or hand grinding your coffee, and you have complete control over the grind size, as well as as well as how much water, control the sweetness, control the caffeine amount. So it takes about 3 to 4 minutes to actually get your brew, and I really feel that this coffee brewing experience, it's great when you have a number of people at home watching you doing it, especially during a Ramadan gathering post iftar, and you're going to have a coffee. It makes for such a pleasurable event on itself. And
And I guess especially when you can tell the story of the coffee, I think that's a great thing as well. So, so I'm very honored, really. In the V60 here, we're using a beautiful Konan coffee from Hawaii. David, who runs the farm, he was an ex-stockbroker out of New York. I think he made quite a bit of money, and he moved to Hawaii with his wife about 7 years ago. They set up this coffee farm, and now they produce some of the best Hawaiian Kona coffee in the world. It's also quite expensive, and I wish I could, we have television or something.
I know.
Trying to smell it from here.
Beautiful. So 30 grams is the key. Okay, so 30 grams on a 15-to-1, and the same with my Nepal coffee as well. I've never done this. I've never done two. Well, actually, first of all we're gonna do the Nepal into the Chemex. We'll give this a go. So I'm brewing today at 93 centigrade. So the range can be anything from 88 to 94, 95. This is just the way that I like it, but other people might have different temperatures. So
I think the common thing is you do not put 100 degrees Celsius boiling water over coffee. You do not try to. It's already roasted, so you don't try to cook it further. Jake Frost has sent us a message asking, can he get an iced tea? Yes, you can, in your own kitchen, Jake.
Maybe we can do that later, yeah?
Yeah, we can do a iced coffee for Jake a bit later. I just want to go back to one of the questions we had from May Mustafa. Since we're talking about coffee from small farms from across the world, how does a coffee a roaster or any roastery ensures that no child labor or slavery is involved in the beans?
Yeah, I mean that's always one that's a big part of the story. I think we visit the farms individually, so we do a personal check. I mean there are I think that coffee is generally not an issue, because it requires a degree of strength to pick the beans. But I think still in in cacao, and I think in tea picking as well, I think those processes still need to be refined. There is currently no certification program, but we certainly make sure in our own visits, and then we get certificates from the farmers as well. But I would say it's a big challenge still, and I don't think, if I'm really honest, I don't think it's 100% right. It's rare I see it in coffee, but definitely in cacao and tea picking, it's still an issue. So I'm not trying to shirk the issue, but it's it needs to be addressed more by the world community for sure.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Pretty much all of the good coffee comes from third world countries.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not amazing coffee coming out of New York City or Melbourne. It's coming out of Ethiopia and Nepal and South America. It's just it's quite a dichotomy. You've got amazing produce coming out of places that unfortunately can be exploited.
Exactly.
Because they sort of it's weird, isn't it? We enjoy this beautiful product, but it comes from these, I guess, disadvantaged communities, and it would be nice to see people like yourself who do pay more attention to that and do pay better prices, because you're getting better. You're going to get a better quality coffee at the end of the day. You're getting a better bean because you have that relationship, rather than, I guess, your big companies that are going to go in there and
I absolutely agree.
people.
I think this It's exactly what we talk about, right? Just being conscious of what you're eating and even the coffee that you're drinking. Do you really know where the beans come from when you go to, any of your international coffee shop chains? But then if you go to somebody who's really, focused on little microbrewers, small farms, exactly have visited there and I know where my beans are coming from. And that makes up for a really great story.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's really important that we in the coffee roasting community are very connected with our farmers. One of the things we always try and do, and I take Nepal as an example, is if you can help to educate people, help to run schools, help to sponsor schools, it puts the kids into classrooms. They get better education and a better life, but also it keeps them off picking or processing. In the tea plantations or potentially in the coffee as well. But I think that all of the major coffee consumers globally, I'm talking about the big chains, for them it's a big issue as well. And one just needs to keep working at it, and to ensure that that at the end of the day that young people are educated at school and go off and stay in schools. So here we are. So our Chemex has been successfully brewed. I was going to talk a little bit about the blooming and about the process. I think you probably watched me do that. So on a 1 to 10 or 10 to 1 here, we've used 30 grams of coffee. So we've used 300 grams in total. And what we really get here is a very light, almost very almost tisane, a tea-like aroma. The body is very light, and I'll just have a quick whiff of one here. And we're getting a lot of sort of orange peel, a little bit of lemon, even a little bit of gooseberry in that. So it's very pleasing.
Can you just remind us about the coffee again? This is the one from Hawaii, isn't it?
This is the Nepalese, actually.
This is the Nepalese one. All right. Yeah.
I started on my left. So this is the Nepalese. When this gets washed, it gets washed in the waters from the Trusuli River, which really means that you get an extremely clean cup here, and that's exactly what you've got here. And it's just almost citrusy, but into such a nice balanced way. And I think if we all get a chance to enjoy this later today after iftar, then that's exactly what we would see. So in summary, the Chemex definitely for later in the day, within 3 or 4 hours of sleeping, it would be fine. But it's the lighter scent, the more pleasurable, and this is where your really expensive specialty coffee lives. Okay, so this is what I would recommend people to use for that style of coffee. If we want, something that's still a specialty coffee, then we're probably going to go for the V60. And this is what you've got as well, I think, Viva. Is that right? You've got a V60.
Yeah, I've got a mocha pot, a V60, an AeroPress. I've got a Kalita. I've got a collapsible Kalita that I'd actually like to show off, because this is great for people who are when the situation gets okay and people would like to go traveling out, or when the weather is better, people who want to do camping trips and so there. And this is really convenient because it can go flat as well as then you can kind of like adjust the shape of it.
Wow.
So it's just a beautiful device, and I'm really happy about this one. So great stuff.
Now we need to get out into the desert and in due course, right, to enjoy one of those.
I know. We should do a live broadcast from the desert sometime soon.
Let's do that. What a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to brief you the V60, if that's okay. So as I said before, you're going to use a thinner paper here. You can normally pick these up from most supermarkets. The grind is much coarser, and we're doing this on a 15 to 1. So this is a little bit different. I've still got my water at 93. If you remember earlier on, I gave this a little bit of a wash, and we're going to bloom in about 30 seconds. Now, the purpose of the blooming is to release the CO2, right? So we're just going to do this, and I've got a a metric here that enables me to put in my first 60 grams. Circular motion, so we're giving everything a good stir. There's my 60 grams.
Sorry, can you just talk to us a little bit about the CO2 for people who didn't quite get it? What's that all about?
Sorry, say that again.
The CO2, the carbon dioxide. What's that got to do with the brewing in the coffee? Yeah,
exactly that. What we're trying to do here is release the CO2 to allow the oils to fall through into my receptacle here. So it's very important that the pour is actually quite slow. Now I'm waiting. Right. What I'm aiming for overall is a 4 minute pour. Now I wish we had a different camera here, but actually what we're able to do, pop some more water in that. That's right. Yeah. What we're able to do.
A bunch of questions coming through as well, so
yeah,
we will get to your questions in a minute, guys. But yeah, carry on, Justin, with the.
Great. So what I'm really trying to do here is to release the CO2. As we release the CO2 off the coffee grains themselves, that allows really the oil and the texture and the aroma of the V60 to come through. I've just got a little bit more water to go in, which I'll pop in a second. And here I'm aiming, therefore, for about slightly larger coffee of 390 grams. So V60, 15:1 is what I enjoy. And you know, on the Chemex, we're using a 10:1.
So that's a question from Leah Clarke. She says, hello. Do you use a finer grind for drip methods, and do you find it improves extraction? So I'm going to try to answer this one.
Go for it.
You know, I just want to flex my muscles a little bit over here. But Justin, please jump in and correct me if I say anything wrong. But then for drip methods, the rule of thumb usually is if you're doing an espresso or a Turkish coffee, then you go for finer ground coffee. But then for a drip method, you would go for a coarser ground. That's only because the grind is actually stays in contact with the water for a much longer period. So you would want actually a coarser ground. So you do not over extract or overcook the coffee while you're extracting that. Did I make sense over there? Yeah. Is that right?
It's exactly that. And what we're trying to do is to bring the bitterness. Well done, yeah. We're trying to avoid bitter coffee, aren't we? Because ultimately, unless you are, an Italian espresso drinker, you know, of which there's nothing wrong with, by the way. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a coffee that's smooth, the body is round, it's a pleasant experience, and brings a smile to your face. Now there is a time, isn't there, for a short, sharp, espresso drink that's very, very bitter, and there are people that still enjoy that. But largely in specialty coffee, you don't want to grind, grind in the wrong way. I think I said before, the V60 is going to use a finer grind than the Chemex that we looked at before, which will be more coarse. And all we're trying to do is we're trying to ultimately release that CO2, surround that grain with the water, and then have that extract out the the chemicals and the oils, which give us that beautiful body and aroma at the end of the day. So that's where we're trying to get to at the end of the day.
And you mentioned the different sort of styles of coffee and times of day, Justin. Obviously, I'm not, and you talk about having specialty coffees up in your V60 Chemex region. Obviously, I'm not going to the supermarket and just getting the Moccona off the shelf and using that for everything. The type of coffee varies for each of these different methods. Is that right?
Yeah, ultimately. And I think as well, you need to bear in mind the origins of the coffees and where you are also, in different origins, different parts of the world gives you, the coffees are more suitable in those, for that style of coffee. So one needs to, I think, probably experiment a lot. We all have personal preference. Riva, you've been introduced to Nepalese coffee. I think most people haven't tried that before. But most people, if they're out of, the US, will know Central American, coffees. I'm a huge fan of coffees out of East Africa, but everybody has their choice, and it's pretty much to do with not only the body and the aroma, but also the level of acidity. And the level of acidity gives the ideal use as well. Some of these methods are great for acidic coffees and some not so. If you're going to have milk with coffee, then you can have generally a more acidic coffee because it's balanced off. So a flat white, goes very, very well with a really acidic, mid-roast Colombian. But if you have that as an espresso, it's almost undrinkable. So it's always about keeping the end result in mind.
Yeah, that was just sorry. Just before you go, Reva, this is my big question and my comment to even some of my colleagues at work. We're always having this argument: does coffee and milk, does sugar and milk destroy coffee? Is it, or to phrase it differently, is there any point buying high-end specialty coffee roast and then putting a couple sugars and milk in it, or should I just buy the crap off the shelf and it doesn't really matter at that stage?
I think you're probably asking the wrong person, but it's a personal preference, and clearly there are brands out there, global brands, that absolutely excel of putting milk and chocolate and whipped cream and other bits on the top.
I don't even want to go to Dalgona coffee, that trend that's happening now that people are at home. Do you guys hear about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm not one to judge, of course, and I think if it works for you, that's great.
I judge, we'll get more views. We can make it viral. We need some.
I just want to finish off. By the way, I know
oh my God, the V60's been hanging there for quite a bit. Yes.
I mean, this is just such a I just wish we could do this at a different time of the year, but it's just so rounded. There's definitely a little bit of saltiness in there. I've got a bit of the sweetness as well. The saltiness, of course, is coming off the sea, and it's just beautifully rounded. And it is stunning. It's tangerine, a little bit of dark orange in there, even a little bit of blackcurrant. But ultimately, it's probably just the best. I can't think of a better coffee globally that represents where specialty coffee should be. So Hawaiian Kona from my mate Dave, right, is where you want to get it. You can look him up, and or you can, of course, it's on our website as well. But
if it helps, Justin, it's just about iftar in Melbourne.
I'm gonna pass
if that makes you feel any better.
Yeah,
you can just duck down and take a sip behind your bench.
Okay.
Does it make me feel better? Guys, we've got like about 8 minutes for our live session to end. But before that, we've got this amazing question from Adrian. I know Adrian from Twitter, and he's just in love with his coffee. I think one of the things that he loves doing is actually running around these areas in Dubai and stopping at coffee shops during his run. He's a marathon runner and actually drinking coffee on the way. So it's almost like a cafe riding, but it's cafe running sort of a thing. So Adrian's joined us, and he's asking if Reva, can you ask Justin to do green beans have a shelf life? And if he stores them in a cool, dark room, how long will they typically last? And I know why he's asking that, because Adrian does home brewing and home roasting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. So the first thing is green beans obviously going to last a lot longer than roasted beans. Typically, when we bring in the beans from countries, they come with a 2-year shelf life. But we do store them, in an AC conditioned warehouse, where we control both the temperature and the humidity. Now, as a very, very roughly less than 50% humidity and less than 25 centigrade. So that's what we're aiming for. And our warehouses are very well insulated and controlled for that. So if you are putting that in your apartment or in your house, just keep it somewhere cool and dark, hopefully that's fed by the AC in the summer, and you should get a year or two out of those. One way to check is if you're going to smell the green beans, which I've got samples of here. if you have a
So
really
for those playing along at home, green beans are. This is what you pick before you roast them, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the way to sense is if they're going off is if they're going to smell musty. So you're going to smell a little bit like mold or rot or something like that, and you may even see a little bit of mold on. Now that's clearly not a good sign, and especially not if you've got 100,000 kilos stored in a warehouse. But if you've just got a few kilos at home, I'd recommend once a month open up the bag and have a smell. My sense is don't keep it in an airtight container, something in we store our coffee in Hessian sacks because it allows the coffee to breathe. So hopefully in a roundabout way that's answered the question on green beans.
Yeah, that's thank you so much for the answer, Justin, and great question, Adrian. So we're about 55 minutes in.
Wow,
so I know there's just so many things going on here. We're talking about coffee, we're talking about brain, we're talking about decaf, and I've got this question that I wanted to ask. So there are several ways of actually processing beans for decaf coffee, isn't there? And then one of those newest methods is actually the Swiss water processing. How does that differ from chemically processed coffee? Is Swiss water process better than chemical processed decaf?
Well, I'm just very briefly, because I know we've only got a few minutes left.
Yeah.
I would encourage you always to look for Swiss water process. Swiss water process is a water process, a hot water process that uses a natural carbon filter to remove the caffeine. This is what we call a chemical-free version. The other one is more for commercial coffees, the CO2 process, which uses very high pressure. In my mind, and certainly the Swiss water processed decaf coffees that we have here, the natural produces a much rounder style of coffee and a much deeper texture, where the CO2 tends to be a little bit more, more sort of industrial, maybe slightly less refined. So my recommendation: Swiss water process every day.
Fantastic. Thank you once again, Justin, for being with us today. I'm not sure whether I've just got several pages of questions here that I wanted to ask you, but we're running out of time. Anything from you, McLean?
No, I think it's been really insightful. I wish I was there to taste some of that coffee because I've been to Kona in Hawaii, so I know the place, and I have had Kona coffee in Kona, but it was a long time ago before I had the appreciation. So definitely like to either go back there and drink some, or see if I can order some online from. There might be some roasters here in Melbourne that might have some Hawaiian, but they tend to be, as you say, East African and South American roasts that are quite popular here at the moment. But I'll look out for some Kona and some Nepalese.
I also wanted to add something. I think Justin's business is one of those who have just we've always been online, but right now with the COVID-19 situation happening, I think you guys have started doing concentrating a little bit more of online sales of coffee.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, our online sales are 5 times what they were previous to coronavirus. So Orbis.coffee /shop. We've recently updated. We've added more coffees now, we deliver worldwide. Might take a bit of time, but certainly within the UAE, we deliver within normally we say within 18 hours of roasting. And also, if you're a frontline worker, please let us know, because we will make sure that we get something special to you as well.
Cool. I think I just managed to switch myself off and come back on again.
Yes, you did. We didn't miss you there at all.
Okay, good. Hit the wrong button. It happens. I need more coffee. That's why I'm not thinking straight.
I'll send it over.
Great. Thank you for the wonderful setup, Justin, once again.
Right.
And it's just lots of great information for our listeners. And a lot of people, if they want to find your coffee, they know where to go to. It's Orbis coffee www.orbis.coffee, isn't it?
Orbis.coffee is the key. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's just scrolling under our feed
Great.
just now. So
Beautiful.
with that, we are wrapping up yet another episode of OnConscious podcast.
Yeah, thanks. My last question, do you deliver internationally, Justin?
Yes, we do. Some countries a bit more of a challenge at the moment, but yeah, Japan is our most our biggest export country. Interestingly enough.
Wow. Yeah, China and Japan surprisingly have incredible coffee culture. Particularly China, I understand they got massive. The coffee culture there is massive, which is maybe another episode. Obviously, you think of them as a tea culture, but the younger generation are massively into the tasting and the cupping and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, interesting. Well, if you deliver to Melbourne, I'll jump on and get some of that Kona coffee for sure.
I'll send you one of these over, okay? So you can try one of our compostable packaging as well. So.
Oh wow, incredible! Awesome. Good stuff. Thanks for coming on, Justin. Thanks for hosting, Reva, as always, and thanks for everyone for all the comments. It's been a super interactive show. That's been really good. Thanks for all the comments and chats, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, we'll see you on the next OnConscious podcast, and see you guys. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, guys. Bye.